All right, and we are live. Welcome everybody to the afternoon webinar for Coronavirus Food Assistance Program 2.0. My name is Kelsey Scott. I am the Director of Programs for the Intertribal Agriculture Council, and it is my privilege to welcome you all to today's webinar. We are joined by our friends at the South Dakota State Office of the Farm Service Agency. Presenting today, we have Gail Gullickson and Jamie White. Gail works in the Brookings office in South Dakota and also serves as state outreach coordinator. Gail, there you are. And then we have Jamie White. Jamie is the acting state director for Farm Service Agency here in South Dakota. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them, and they will share with us information about the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program 2.0.
Very good. Thank you. I'll just put in a few words of thanks here, and good afternoon and welcome everyone. I am Gail Gullickson. Like she said, I work in outreach, but I also work as a senior farm loan officer, like she said, in Brookings. So I've been very passionate about that as well for a lot of years. Thank you to Kelsey and Elise, the entire IAC staff for hosting this webinar with us today. We kind of appreciate that relationship we have with you folks and being able to look forward to talking to producers about the CFAP 2 today. And I am going to turn it over to Jamie White. She is our acting state executive director, does a wonderful job taking care of us and our producers. And so she's going to share more of the details with you today. But always, if there's questions, please put them in the chat or reach out to us, and we'll always let you know too, contacting local service centers. If you can't get a hold of Jamie or myself, that's a good local place for you to start right at your service center with those folks to help you get enrolled and going. So Jamie, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Gail, and thank you, Kelsey, and the rest of IAC. As both Gail and Kelsey have mentioned, this is a great relationship, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us just to sit down and have a conversation with producers. And ultimately, that's who we're here to serve. And I will share, yes, we're talking about the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, CFAP 2.0, as the agency has referred to. There are some new nuances regarding CFAP 2.0, but essentially this is a discussion about a program that we have been administering for some time. And we do have a slideshow that I'll be referring to as we go through the presentation. But as Gail mentioned, questions are great. That's what makes this dialogue important. And we want this presentation to be meaningful to you and your operations. So don't hesitate, again, to reach out. So I'm just going to highlight, obviously, as you've met both Gail and I do also want to point out that we do have on the state office staff, we're blessed to have a great team of subject matter experts, and Teresa Hoadley actually is the program specialist that oversees the coronavirus food assistance programs at the state office on our team. So again, that's another point of contact in addition to the local service center staff. And I really can't say enough about the local service center staff. They're going to be your one-on-one points of contact. I also know that IAC serves as a great technical service or provides great technical service in regard to USDA programs. But again, your local point of contact is going to be able to have great information that's pertinent to your specific county and even can tie that down to your specific operation. So when we're talking about CFAP today, we're going to talk primarily about CFAP 2.0 and what is new with CFAP 2.0 specifically. And beginning on in April, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, CFAP 2, was reopened for a minimum of 60 additional days actually. And what had happened is when FSA had previously administered CFAP 2.0, when the new administration came into play and they started to look at the coronavirus food assistance program, CFAP 2.0, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not effective outreach had taken place. And a lot of that was based on the merit of applications we had on file, funds that had been expended, etc. And so there was a proactive move to go ahead and reopen CFAP 2.0 again for that additional 60 days, and that was reopened on April 5th, and there hasn't been a deadline as of right now. So what we'll talk about a little bit more extensively today is those who've had CFAP 2 applications on file, how that benefits you specifically, and for those individuals who maybe did not sign up for CFAP 2.0 under the original sign up, what options that they would have to pursue that sign up for that program at this point in time. As we look at CFAP 2, ultimately the overall goal of CFAP 2 is to provide relief for producers impacted by COVID-19. And essentially it was intended to address two specific challenges from the coronavirus: price declines and supply chain disruptions. So USDA is very aware that the pandemic caused a decline in demand for commodities, and ultimately it affected the market supply chain. So with CFAP 2, there are direct payments that are provided to eligible producers, which we'll talk a bit about, for eligible commodities. So it again is addressing price declines and supply chain disruptions, as well as additional marketing costs. The good news is if there's a CFAP 2.0 application that is filed, once FSA reviews that application and acts on that application for approval, participants are eligible for 100% of that payment immediately. So we're not making a partial payment and then reassessing what funds are available, but we're paying 100% of that payment upfront. Application period is taking place right here, right now. We can do that virtually by calling the county office. We can go ahead and send out an application in the mail, hard copy, by email. We can even direct individuals to the website at farmers.gov to access the application data online. There's absolutely no fee to apply. And one of the other good aspects of the CFAP 2.0 program is these are direct payments. They're not a loan. There is no repayment of the payments that are earned. The only time that would come into play is if there's concern about an error with the application and or fraud, which of course we're not concerned about that. So payments can be processed very quickly and paid immediately after that application is approved. And there is not any offset of CFAP 2.0 payments in the event there's prior USDA debts or Treasury offset. So individuals who are eligible for those payments, once they're paid and processed, 100% of that payment would go to the eligible applicant. We're briefly just going to touch base on eligible commodities. Obviously, there are many commodities eligible nationwide. I like to have the discussion for South Dakota locally. That's what our concern is here today. But of course, aquaculture, broilers, eggs, pullets, dairy, floriculture, nursery crops, livestock. I think livestock is probably a big player for our discussion today. Livestock by contract growers, although there's some nuances with that, are traditional row crops, specialty crops, which would include turf grass sod, specialty livestock, which would include those pullets, and then tobacco and wool, which of course would not be applicable in South Dakota. So contract producers, that was one of the big discussions early on in the month of January, that contract producers would go ahead or they would be eligible under CFAP 2.0. So the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2021 that was enacted in December 2020 did indicate that FSA will be making certain payments to swine and poultry contract producers affected by the pandemic. And that does include your broilers, pullets, layers, turkeys, chickens, eggs, hogs, and pigs. And it's based on 2020 revenue loss compared to 2019 overall eligible revenue. What I will share in regard to the contract producers is that this continues to be evaluated by USDA. They're closely looking at the rules for the contract grower portion of CFAP 2.0. So contract producers can submit applications, but there may be additional information required at a later date once the rulemaking portion is complete. Ineligible commodities, we don't want to focus on this too much, but in South Dakota, we have livestock operations. Many of you obviously raise your own hay. We have a lot of pasture land. That is a concern, but unfortunately, hay is not included as an eligible commodity under CFAP 2.0, nor crops intended for grazing. Alfalfa is considered to be an eligible commodity under CFAP 2.0. So there would have to be an FSA acreage report, that 578 that we refer to, indicating that it is alfalfa specifically to be eligible for CFAP 2.0. Unfortunately, equine breeding stock, companion and comfort animals, and then other species raised for hunting or game purposes are not eligible. Clover, cover crops, so that would be crops specifically reported on the FSA 578 as cover crop. Fallow acres, soybeans for forage, gardens, pollinators, and then there are other ineligible commodities, but those are likely the ones that are most pertinent in South Dakota. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's new with CFAP. And I know we're talking about CFAP 2.0, but I do want to highlight how the latest provisions affect CFAP 1. So to be clear, we are not currently taking applications for CFAP 1. That application period was not reopened on April 5th like CFAP 2.0 was. But there was a determination that CFAP 1 applicants would be eligible for a one-time top-up payment for cattle that were held in inventory. And for those of you who are familiar with CFAP 1 and potentially participated, one of the concerns is that there was a significant disparity for payments made under CFAP 1 for livestock sold within a designated period and then livestock held in inventory, because those livestock that were held in inventory continued to be affected by market disruption. So there is a one-time top-up payment rate for cattle, and in the next slide, I'll share the payments that would be made, and that was automatically made and issued based on the CFAP 1 application that was on file and approved, and those payments would have been likely issued beginning on or after April 5th. And so many of you may have received those payments if you did have eligible livestock reported as inventory livestock on that CFAP 1 application. CFAP 2 applications that are currently on file, and even those applications that are yet to be filed, will be eligible for an additional $20 per acre payment on the flat rate or price trigger eligible commodities. So that could include alfalfa, that could include wheat, corn, soybeans. So if there's an application on file for CFAP 1, no action needs to take place. Those payments were likely already made, but if not, and you feel you would be eligible, please contact your local office so they can look at that. If a CFAP 2 application is on file and you were paid for that previously, again, those top-up payment rates or top-up payments for the price trigger or flat rate commodities should have automatically been issued. If the application was not on file, participants can complete a CFAP 2.0 application today, and they will also receive the benefit of that additional top-up payment of $20 per acre. So I'm just going to reference the payments for cattle as it pertains to the CFAP 1 top-up payment. And if you all recall, when we completed the CFAP 1 applications, and I remember this was quite a challenge, not only for you as producers and livestock owners, but for our FSA staff, because there were many different categories of livestock. And under CFAP 1, they were broken down into feeder cattle of less than 600 pounds or 600 pounds or more, slaughter cattle, fed cattle, slaughter cattle, mature cattle, and then all other cattle in general. And again, the challenge was how many of these categories, could potentially, be skewed, and the same, head of livestock could potentially fit, multiple categories. But under CFAP 1, the only time those different categories resulted in a different payment rate is if they were sold livestock. The livestock held in inventory under CFAP 1 were paid at a flat rate of $33 per head. And then, of course, CFAP 2 only looked again at it looked at the livestock under CFAP 2, non-breeding livestock, obviously only those livestock that were intended or were intended for market and would be impacted by the market disruption were paid at a $55 rate per head. Now the top-up payment that's taking place under this latest authority does look at those individual categories, those individual CFAP 1 categories. And for feeder cattle less than 600 pounds, there's an additional $7 per head payment. Feeder cattle of 600 pounds or more receive an additional $25.50 per head. Slaughter cattle, an additional $63 per head. The mature cattle under slaughter cattle would receive an additional $14.75 per head, and all other cattle would receive an additional $17.25 per head. So again, that's all based on those initial CFAP 1 applications that were on file. If you have any questions or concerns about the livestock categories on the original application or where your payment is, again, please contact your local county office to clarify that.
Jamie, this is Gail. There was a question about what are top-up payments. And I know you talked about them here. That was something in the chat. So I thought maybe, why we call them that top-up. That's one of our little lingo. Maybe just touch on that again, that little term, just to maybe answer that question in the chat. How about?
Absolutely. And thank you, Gail, for jumping in. I like to have the conversation timely. When we refer to top-up payments, and Gail hit that spot on, we use lots of language here at USDA and acronyms that make sense to us in time, but outside of USDA can be a bit confusing. The reason FSA or USDA is referring that as a top-up payment is because there was an additional payment rate under the prior authorized program, and it's being referred to as a top-up payment based on available funding that was authorized that would be payment in addition to that initial base payment. So in all actuality, that reference to top-up, it's something that USDA has utilized when we're making additional payments for data already on file. And it's a way to maximize current authorized funds to get that out into the hands of producers impacted by the pandemic.
There was one more question. Oh, sorry.
Sure. Nope, go right ahead.
As long as you're talking about questions, and you were talking about what was already happening in 2020. So there was a question from a dairy farmer. It said they'd already gotten paid in 2020 and were told they do not qualify this year. So maybe that's something as we're going through it, just to revisit with the dairy scenarios, if you know offhand or can clarify that a little bit, why they were not going to qualify again this year because of the 2020 getting paid.
Okay.
Like I said, we can, that was just the only other question as far as we could revisit that. So if you
yes. And what we'll revisit that as we move forward. And all I would ask on the dairy, if additional details could be provided in the chat, what program they were paid under, et cetera. And we should be able to touch on that a little bit moving forward. So eligibility, and I clearly just want to cover this just because FSA, through the administration of disaster programs, and then even more recently, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, we have met and engaged with lots of individuals that we traditionally haven't done business with. And sometimes that's because they're new producers, they're new operations, or sometimes they just, simply were not aware of the programs that FSA offered. And what I really want to emphasize and highlight is that CFAP 2.0 is available to all individuals that meet the basic criteria. They don't have to be an existing producer with USDA. They don't have to have a farm number. They don't even have to have prior FSA acreage reports on file. So essentially, if you're hearing this and you have an operation that you feel meets the basic criteria, because there were crops reported or you did have crops planted in the 2020 crop year, you did have potential livestock that were sold or held in inventory, you did have a valid operation, absolutely contact FSA. We can walk through the completion of the CFAP application, and our staff stand ready to help you complete those additional documents to be eligible for CFAP 2.0 and begin the process of becoming a USDA customer. And again, I know that IAC stands ready to help you in that regard as well. So assistance is available only on commercially produced commodities. So obviously we're going back to that impact from market disruption. Conservation compliance is a requirement. So when we talk about conservation compliance, that's ensuring that producers who do receive USDA assistance through programs, that they are complying with highly erodible land conservation and wetland conservation requirements. And if they're not a current customer, that is something that we can walk through the certification process and explain those parameters as well. And then non-citizens that would have a green card or an I-551 would need to provide significant contribution to capital land and active personal labor to be eligible. CFAP 1 and CFAP 2.0 had a different payment limitation than other programs, and the payment limitation is $250,000 per person or legal entity. If a producer participated in CFAP 1, they could receive up to $250,000. And then if they participated in CFAP 2, they could earn an additional $250,000. So they are separate and distinct payment limitations. And unlike other FSA programs, there was a unique payment limitation criteria included in CFAP. And essentially, participants that are corporations, limited liability companies, limited partnerships, including corporate entities, trusts, and estates, could be eligible for payments of up to 3 payment limitations, or a total of $750,000, if they can demonstrate that they did provide at least 400 hours of active personal labor, personal management, or a combination thereof in regard to the production of the 2020 commodities. So that is a unique nuance with CFAP. As we had previously discussed, participants do not have to be a current USDA customer. If we've had, or if a customer has conducted business with USDA in prior years and they've completed an acreage report, reported hayland, reported pasture land, those things specifically because they have an interest in land either that they own or that they lease, there would be a farm number established in which that producer would be an owner or operator on that farm. If that's not in place today, it's not necessary, not required, we still can go through the CFAP 2.0 application, and then we would help producers go ahead and complete the conservation compliance requirements, which are contained on the form 80-1026, and we would handle that farm number at a later date to establish records, but that farm number is not required for application and to issue that initial payment. So again, that's not a hindrance. Application options, we again briefly talked about this. Producers can apply seamlessly online if they have an established EAuthentication account. Unfortunately, EAuthentication is not something that's been utilized widespread. It's something that FSA and USDA continue to promote and we continue to enhance. If you are interested in obtaining an EAuthentication account, you would need to work with your local office to establish that. We can also very, very easily facilitate the application process just by calling the county office. They can go ahead and email it to you, they can mail it to you, or they can walk you through the application process by downloading the application form, and that can be sent virtually or hard copy back again to the office. Right now, with the USDA pandemic protocols, we're not open to the general public like we have been in the past. We can go ahead and take appointments. We can do those appointments virtually. And there may be the opportunity, if there's truly a need for an in-person appointment, that our local office can arrange that in a manner that would be safe both for you as the participant as well as our staff within the office. There is also a customer care call center that has been established for CFAP 2.0. I will share this is to me a positive step that USDA has taken, and we're going to start to see this more and more for administration or program updates. And you can call the 877-508-8364 number. The call center, one thing that to me is beneficial, especially if you're in the central part of the United States, and obviously we have a lot of folks in central and mountain time, we get the benefits of being bookended by those in the Eastern time zone and those in the Pacific time zone. So for the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central, and obviously that would change as you transition to mountain time zone from 6 to 6, there are staff that are available to answer questions, and they can even go ahead and redirect you to your local service center for more specific information regarding your operation. But again, it's a great number to call, ask some basic questions. Maybe that allows you to get a little bit more informed, get your information ready before you contact the local FSA office if that's your preference. If not, please, again, just feel free to reach out to your local staff. So I will share USDA continues to develop forms and alternate languages to ensure that we have information available to all individuals. There is a specific call center set up for Spanish speaking individuals as well as forms. So we just want to highlight that. I'd like to talk a little bit about documentation. And this is one thing I know that I've had the opportunity to talk with IAC and Kelsey about, and I think this is something we can work together to help you as producers and as well as even FSA and USDA, that if we work together, we get the information out, it helps to make the application process more seamless, and it helps, again, to ensure that you are applying and receiving assistance in regard to programs and benefits for what you're eligible for, and you're maximizing that overall potential. So CFAP 2.0 is based on a producer certification. So essentially you're completing the application, you're identifying your livestock numbers based on your certification. Crops are a bit different. That is being based on the FSA acreage report that was filed in 2020, which again is also a producer certification. So you're not providing verifiable or reliable documentation in regard to either the livestock or the crops that are being reported. If you have not completed an acreage report for 2020 as of yet, because you haven't done business with FSA, that's fine. For CFAP 2.0, you can still complete that acreage report and ensure that you do receive assistance in regard to the 2020 planted acres. Now, even though it is a producer certification, it is not uncommon for USDA to have spot check procedure where there are random applications that are spot checked. And if there would be a spot check, at that time, producers would need to provide their documentation to FSA for review to verify the accuracy of that certification. So that is one thing that we just need to tell you up front to make sure you do have that documentation should it be pulled for spot check. The other benefit of having that documentation is it provides you with a quick and easy glance at what numbers you have that would be available for that CFAP assistance to make sure you're not losing benefits that you would potentially be eligible for. So again, documents that might help assist with that documentation for spot checks or marketing statements, contracts, sales receipts. When we're looking at livestock, ultimately we're looking at inventory records. Maybe that's calving, books, calving records. Obviously, if you've purchased livestock, sold livestock, having that information available to reconcile is key in the spot check process. Vaccination records, again, are very helpful, but something to demonstrate that you have an accurate livestock count and that those are livestock you have a risk in. Contract growers, grower agreements, the 2019 and 2020 revenue records, specialty crops, that is going to, again, be based on sales records and potentially having insurance documentation. Dairy is based on the milk marketing statements for April to August of 2020, and then the records of dump milk for those same dates as well. After you sign your application, so you may sign your initial CFAP 2.0 application today, and you might be that new producer that we talked about. Once you sign that CFAP 2.0 application, you have 60 days to complete all of the other required eligibility documents. And what we're talking about there is if you're new to FSA and you complete your CFAP 2.0 application, you report your inventory livestock to FSA, maybe you even complete the FSA 578 acreage report for 2020, and you do that today. But if you don't complete the 80-10-26 for conservation compliance, we need to have that completed to resolve that any outstanding eligibility issue. We also need to have your basic farm records data available as well. So if those items aren't completed within 60 days, we then have an incomplete application that will not be available for approval after that 60-day time frame. So the best advice that I would provide is just to maintain that communication with the local FSA staff and confirm that in addition to your CFAP 2.0 application, that all other criteria or all other required documents have been completed as required by CFAP 2.0. Once everything's complete, obviously the application, initially specifically, our local staff is going to review the application once you've signed it. And if they have any questions or clarifications, it's their responsibility to follow up with you as the participant. So oftentimes our staff, especially if you've done business with FSA over the years and they have awareness of your operation, it's not uncommon for our staff to call and say, hey, you know, it doesn't look like you've reported any an increase in numbers that maybe happened as a result of this year's calving season or something of that nature. Once we verify that all documents in addition to the application are on file, the application will be acted on and approved and processed for payment. And all payments that FSA makes, the first line of action or to issue that payment is through a direct deposit. So when we go ahead and process and approve an application for payment, and then we kick out those payments, it can take up to 5 days to then be deposited in the individual's bank account. So there is a little bit of a delay in that direct deposit process. When you receive payment, you're also going to get a notification of that payment. And with that payment notification, there is also due process. So if you have any concerns with that overall payment or it's not what you thought it would be, there is an appeal process that you can pursue that allows that review of that initial payment. And outside of that, that is, I guess, the complete slideshow. I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions. I know Gail and Kelsey are monitoring that, and hopefully we have additional details on that dairy question that I could assist with.
Thanks, Jamie. That was awesome as always. And this is Gail here. I've got something in chat for you. I don't see anything else on the dairy, but we can maybe follow up afterwards. I believe we'll be able to get that from Kelsey and maybe an email as well. So if there's anything after the fact, but there was a question here on tax implications of the CFAP 2. And I know we do hear that quite a little bit with all of the payments that went out, Jamie, last year. So maybe you can just offer kind of a general statement or overview on that.
Certainly, and I can understand that, especially when there's additional funding or additional payments received when individuals are already challenged, obviously with the pandemic. But any time in which there is an FSA program payment that is received, there is going to be a 1099 statement issued, and that is going to be reportable income. So unfortunately, FSA is not in a position where we can delay payments to accommodate potential tax implications of a producer. So I'm not sure if there were additional details to that question that I'm missing, but in general, there will be taxable income if a CFAP 2.0 payment is received.
Okay. Yep, and that was it on the CFAP 2 tax implications. There's just one more question, it looks like. What if a new producer has bought cattle after April 5th?
Correct. And that's a great question. I'm glad we hear that. So because CFAP 2.0 was reopened on April 5th, that doesn't change the window of eligibility. So CFAP 2.0, that same window of eligibility, obviously it was prior to that April 5th opening date. So newly purchased cattle would not be eligible under CFAP 2.0. I do see one quick question, Gail, and I don't know if you had noticed this. There's a reference that we are still waiting for CFAP 2 payments due to a mistake from the local FSA office. And I certainly would not expect anybody to talk about their individual operation on this call. But if it's something that you feel is hanging out there and you haven't been able to get the resolution at the local office, please reach out to me. You can do that directly to me. By contacting the state office at 605-352-1160 or via email to jamie.white@usda.gov. I love to interact and engage with you who are boots on the ground. And if there's a way I can help, I'm happy to do that. So please don't hesitate to do that if I could be of help.
Yeah, kind of looks like that might be it. And like, unless Kelsey or her crew has thought of some more questions or with CFAP 2 we're missing out on. So yeah, it looks like nothing on Facebook, but it's fun that they could join us through Facebook Live as well. So thank you for having that as another avenue to reach folks. So do you have anything else for us?
Not on our end as far as questions coming in. I do appreciate that there is willingness to follow up afterwards. We will definitely do that. For those of you that had asked questions but weren't able to, didn't provide in-depth personal information in order to get the most clear-cut answers, please reach out to us. You can reach out directly to Jamie, or you can reach out to us at IAC and we'll make sure to connect you with her or somebody else that can help provide the answer. So with that, thank you both, Gail and Jamie, for joining us. And thank you to all of the attendees who joined us for our CFAP 2.0 webinar this afternoon. This recording will be available on YouTube, so we definitely would encourage you to share it once we get it posted with producers that you know weren't able to attend today. Definitely love that support of outreach out there on the ground as well.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.